As Ms. Rutledge said, we presented to the public last night. Had a third public information session where we shared some maps with them. The final 4 maps that we have come to bring to you, and really at this point we're handing them over to the board for your consideration. There are 4 maps that we have drafted and that we have shared with the public, and there's a survey out there right now that the public is working to provide some additional input for you guys. But we really think that all 4 of these maps are viable, and if you chose any of the 4, we feel like they do adhere to the objectives and the criteria, and that they are all viable options. They do have, certain ones have strengths and weaknesses, but we would support you on from a consulting standpoint on if you chose any of the 4 maps. But what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of an overview on some of the work that we have done and what we have shared publicly. We did meet with the public back a month or so, maybe 2 months ago, and shared some initial maps. There were 3 maps at that time, options 1, 2, and 3. After that public input was received, and as we continue to study maps, we modified 2 of the maps and we created a 4th map. So options 2 and 3 were modified, and then option 4 is another look. And so what I'm presenting to you tonight are those 4 final maps that we had that we shared with the public last night. A little recap on why we need to do this and what our charge was is Town Creek Middle School needs a zone. There is no zone for Town Creek right now, and so that's one of the primary reasons for initiating this effort. Another component is Belleville Elementary is pretty overcrowded. They're substantially overcrowded. There have been additions put on to Lincoln Elementary and Town Creek Elementary in this region, and the hope is that Belleville can get some capacity relief with some of these additions that have been planned at the elementary schools. And so we've looked at focusing primarily on the northern part of the county, Town Creek, Lincoln, and Belleville elementary schools, and seeing how those can come into play to help provide some relief to Belleville and also create a new zone for Town Creek Middle School. We did have some rules to follow. There's a phase 2 component of work. I think, as you know, our work is not complete with this, or our first phase was just looking at trying to help with Town Creek Middle School in the first phase and focusing on the northern part of the county. Our next phase, starting this upcoming year, we're going to be looking more comprehensively at the whole county and determining where there may need to be other adjustments that we can recommend to you or to bring forward to you to help balance utilization and account for the growth and the decline and ebbs and flows of enrollment and utilization. So that's something that's forthcoming. That isn't part of this, but that's what we're considering phase 2, which is going to be kicking off and really starting in next year. Really more heavily in next fall and winter is what we anticipate for that second phase and for recommendations coming to you. We have worked with the district to help facilitate this whole effort and providing a lot of materials. We do have an updated demographic study that has been developed, as well as working with the staff and developing a plan to engage the public and follow best practices as it relates to redistricting work, and just giving the community the ability to have a voice and to give us input through the course of the study, so that it's not just a big surprise at this meeting, and that the public is aware of what has been discussed and explored leading up to now, which helps alleviate some of the pressure and the anxiety from the public, and that they have been involved and been able to provide input throughout the course of the study. The criteria we had to follow, the rules to follow, basically to determine if one map is better than another, are to the greatest extent keep students at a neighborhood school. Also, to the greatest extent, try to keep the maximum numbers for high schools at 1,400, middle schools at 750, and elementary schools at 600. Knowing that your capacities do vary from school to school, and so we were looking at this item of the criteria, but also trying to make sure that the utilization, number of available seats, is balanced. For example, Town Creek Middle School has much fewer seats than Leland Middle School, and so looking at those kind of factors and making sure that there's an equitable amount of seats available in this plan, so that you guys could, the schools can absorb future growth, but then also have a comparable amount of available space to deliver education. Also looking at keeping the average bus route between 60 to 75 minutes. And like I said, I think all 4 options do adhere to these criteria pretty well. There are some advantages and limitations with any one, but transportation has been around the table talking with us about the maps, and we don't anticipate any issues adhering to these criteria with any 4 options based off of the input from a transportation perspective and talking with transportation and working with them throughout the course of the study. We did have the public info session, like I said, a month or 2 ago, and we just downloaded that information and provided some summary information to the public last night, and this is also available in a report that's on the redistricting webpage. But we had about 161 people respond to the survey. Most of the respondents were coming from the Belleville area, which isn't surprising because that's the area that has been impacted the most, especially at the elementary level. Students have been moved out of Belleville and into either Lincoln or Town Creek, and some in Bolivia in a couple of scenarios. And so, and Town Creek Elementary also provided a lot of input to us out of, if you look at the respondents and where they came from. And so we had good input, given that it was a small sort of subsection of the county and minimal impacts with this, and so I think that the response from the survey was positive and very good. It was very helpful to hear from the public and get their input and have conversations around the maps with them. A lot of concerns that the public had expressed to us were concerns about Lincoln being too full in some of the original maps that we shared with them. We had Lincoln up to close to 750 in some of the maps, and the thought was having them be at least 700 or lower would be better because they are forecasted to grow at Lincoln as well as Town Creek and Belleville. So that was some of the concern. And there were also concerns about demographics and the impact of some of the maps and the areas that were being moved from school to school. Although we weren't looking at demographics as part of our criteria, it was something that was expressed by the public, and also we have listened to them and also talking with staff, people with more local knowledge about some of the demographics, dynamics of the communities, and trying to make sure that we don't compromise the balance that exists with your schools. We asked the public in the report what their concern, if they had concerns, what was their concern. A lot of the concerns that we had heard from the public was related to, I think if I go back, where the option, this is a good one right here. The approval, we asked them if they approve, like, neutral, dislike, or oppose any option. And you can see we had a good number of people approved and liked options 1 and 2, about 40, close to 45%, a little more for option 1, a little more for option 2. Option 3 had lower approval and likes from respondents to the survey. A lot of this was option 3 moved a larger number of students than the other 2 options, so there were more families being impacted, and that's really why you, as I interpret these tables, what the primary rationale is for option 3 not being supported was because a lot more families were being impacted. We did ask them what their concern was if they did have concerns with the options, and you can see option 3, the primary concern was transportation. This option 3 moves the Mallory Creek community that's south of Belleville. They currently go to Belleville. This moves them into Town Creek in option 3, and they had transportation concerns with the ease of getting to Belleville from Mallory Creek now versus having to go through a neighborhood or another community potentially to get to Town Creek Elementary. And so there were other concerns with options 1 and 2 as it relates to transportation, and those were expressed in the survey. They're showing in the survey, and we also talked with parents about those. The middle school options all are very similar to the elementary in terms of concerns that we had and how things how they play out. And so one of the things that should be noted is that the elementary option and the middle school options are paired together. So if you choose elementary option 1 or elementary option 4, you need to choose middle school, the same middle school option, because with the effort of keeping feeder patterns 100%. And so the options kind of, both schools, elementary and middle, go along to the same ride based off of what option you you feel is best for the district. We asked them other information about what their approvals and likes and dislikes and opposed based off of what zones they live in, and so it was fairly balanced. You can see if you look across the board, with option 1, Belleville had the greatest number of respondents, but 40 approved and 31 opposed, and so it's really kind of a mixed bag of input in terms of no clear winner in this. But option 3 definitely had more people opposed than the other 2 options. I think that was kind of one of the bigger takeaways with some of the input that we received. Same thing goes with the middle school summaries and things like I had already talked about. So we shared 4 options, like I said last night, with the public. A couple of key notes is that all of the schools, the utilization is balanced. We do provide Belleville capacity relief in all 4 maps. Town Creek Elementary does feed entirely into Town Creek Middle in all 4 maps, and Lincoln and Belleville feed entirely into Leland Middle in all 4 maps. So we did make some adjustments, and I'll dive into the maps here to kind of give you a little bit of some background. So you can see the black outline represents the current zone for Belleville Elementary, and then the background color represents the option. So that northwestern part of Belleville, that's off Old Fayetteville Road, and this map feeds into Lincoln Elementary to give Belleville some capacity relief, and Lincoln has the space to accommodate those communities. Other communities just south of that area are feeding in from Belleville into Town Creek Elementary, and those are the Waterford and Magnolia Green communities, and those communities would feed into Town Creek Elementary and Town Creek Middle in this map. The final adjustment is you see the southern part of Belleville, the area that's green, that's an area that would move into Bolivia Elementary in this map, and they would also go to South Brunswick Middle School. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Gwen, Ms. Gwen.
Yes, sir.
Looking at map 1 here, since Magnolia Greens and Waterford are being moved in this map, what would be the approximate time on a school bus to Town Creek for them? Just ballpark.
I just handed Sue my numbers. Hang on just a second. These are just down and dirty times because we don't have the potential boundaries in our system. So I base those times on what we did in the early 90s before we had computerized systems, which was 4 minutes per mile. It was a basic average that you could do a bus route. So Magnolia Greens and Waterford going to Town Creek would be about 42 minutes. Magnolia Greens and Waterford going to Belleville would be about 25 minutes based on 4 minutes per mile.
The section down in green on that map going to Bolivia, what would be that ride?
I don't have that information in front of me, but currently you can see on the current boundaries.
You've got kids
right
up to here from
We've
Bolivia
got kids right there
already
going to Bolivia now that are within that 60 to 75
how long
minutes.
is their ride? Do you remember that?
I do not know that specifically, but they are not over 75 minutes, I know. I would think they were closer more to 50 probably.
I was going to say 45.
Yeah, they're not pushing the 60 to 75 minute time at all, and you might add another 3 or 4 minutes to go up to Southern and Central and get them and bring them down. It would not be a significant increase to them. We're very close to them already from Bolivia.
We don't have a route through there already, do we?
We
Going
do.
to Bolivia.
We
Dawes
do
Creek?
up to Dawes Creek, yes.
Thank you.
So this is option 1. This shows you the moves that were impacts to Belleville and where they're being sent to. The middle schools follow the same lines as the elementary. So you can see Town Creek Middle is in the blue. The black line that sort of bisects the Town Creek Middle Zone is the current line between Leland and South Brunswick Middle. And so that southern area would be pulled out of South Brunswick into Town Creek, and then the northern part would be pulled out of Leland into Town Creek Middle. Again, Town Creek Middle is basically being fed solely by Town Creek Elementary in all 4 maps. And then Leland Middle is being fed by Lincoln and Belleville Elementary Schools. And then that brown area that we just discussed going to Bolivia, that does feed into South Brunswick Middle in this map to try to keep, resolve a small feeder pattern split that would exist if they stayed. And so that was why that got sent down south to South Brunswick for feeder pattern alignment. So this map does have a really good balance of utilization among your schools. Belleville's still a little high, they're at 97%, but it gets capacity relief. We feel like it would sustain in the long term, looking at the forecasted enrollment, and this would give it relief now and also in the future. This map impacts the fewest number of students at 185 elementary students and second most at middle school. Feeder pattern alignment is all 100%, like I said. Town Creek Middle would be at about 60% utilization, and which gives them room to grow. We do anticipate growth in the Town Creek zone coming from construction and also students that have already moved into that area, moving through the system, aging through. You do have some longer distance to middle school for students. I know that one of the board members had brought that up. And that community, the Waterford community and the Magnolia Green community, is very close to Leland Middle. If you look at it on a map, it's not as easy to get to Leland Middle from that area, and that they have to kind of go around and go up Landvale Road, and then go to Old Fayetteville Road to get to Leland. And so it's not a direct route. And most parents in these communities are not opposed to the move, but there are parents, I should say, that I talked to one last night at the public meeting who was concerned because he actually walks his child to Leland from that, he's in the far northern part, and he was concerned about the impact on transportation. So you can't say that everybody's happy with it, but I do know that the majority of the feedback we've heard is not, there's not opposition to this move. Option 2 looks the same for that northwestern corner of Belleville. The same area is moved to Lincoln. The same area is moved to Town Creek to give Belleville their capacity relief. But the difference between this map and option 2, or option 1, is that southern area that we sent to Bolivia feeds into Town Creek Elementary School. It's just a different look, and that would feed into Town Creek Elementary and Town Creek Middle instead of going to Bolivia like option 1 showed.
Question. Ms. Gwen, how long is that ride for those kids to Town Creek?
I think it would probably end up being very close to the same time. The problem it's going to be for transportation, from a transportation standpoint, is we're already going as far as Dawes Creek with Bolivia buses, so you're essentially going to put 2 elementary schools buses.
2 half-full buses.
Right, 2 in that same area.
Yeah, the option 1 leverages a bus in that you can further fill up the bus. This one creates a challenge in needing an additional bus because you're going to 2 different schools. You know, a little bit more of a challenge than option 1 in terms of transportation.
Is that something you would address in option 2? Same thing with the size of the middle schools being a little on the small side. Would you look at moving some of Bolivia into the middle school district? Is that
for phase 2, as we look at phase 2, well, what we try to do in phase 2 is we haven't really looked comprehensively at the whole county. But one of the things that we're going to focus on is not impacting this region again. So if we're moving an area now, we don't want to move them again. It's possible that there could be more students added into, like Bolivia certainly going to be in play in phase 2. And possibly adding more students to Bolivia or taking out, depending on the utilization of the schools and the remainder of the county.
Or filling Town Creek Middle up with drafting some out of Bolivia or somehow.
It's possible, yeah. It's possible that could occur. We do expect Town Creek Middle Zone to grow. With I think we had about 120 students projected to increase at the elementary level, and that's going to move its way into middle school. And Town Creek Middle is not a very big school, and so we have it, we have some room for you to grow. And so, but as you grow, given that it's 350 capacity, you know, it's not going to take much to fill that school up. So when we look at phase 2, we may be mindful of adding some to Town Creek Middle, but we don't want to add too much because make sure that they have longevity and can hold as long as possible. And the middle school zone looks like this for option 2. The same concept. All of Town Creek Elementary feeding into Town Creek Middle, and then Leland Middle is served by Lincoln and Belleville elementary school communities. And this one does have good balanced utilization. Belleville is still at around 97%, like option 1. Same notes for that. It impacts the fewest number of students, just like option 1, 185. Second fewest number of middle school students. Town Creek's a little bit higher in utilization in this because that southern area of Belleville goes to Town Creek. So it's at about 62.5% utilization. Again, that number seems low when you look at a percentage, but when you're talking about 62% of a 350-seat building, you add a small number to that, and that percentage rate goes up much quicker than if you're looking at a 1,100-seat building, just because of the rules of statistics and things. You still have the distance from areas around Leland feeding into Town Creek Middle, Waterford and Magnolia Green. That still exists. It's a longer distance than it is to Leland Middle, and so that's something that is identified here. This is option 3. So this is a map that looks different than 1 and 2. That same northwestern area is feeding into Lincoln, that coming out of Belleville, like options 1 and 2 show. But in this particular map, that Waterford and Magnolia Green stay in Belleville. And then Belleville even extends west of Landvale Road in areas that are currently in Town Creek Elementary to feed into Belleville, just north of 17. And then in this map, the Mallory Creek community that's south of Belleville feeds, and everything south of that would feed into Town Creek. So this gives it more of a horizontal alignment of your zones. You're not stretching so close up into Leland Middle in this map. But this map does impact more than twice as many students as the other maps and other options that have been considered here. If you look at the middle school zone lines, you can see that this does have a little bit more of a buffer around Leland Middle, and that Town Creek Middle line doesn't come up as close to Leland. But you know, there's pros and cons with any map, and I think this one is a little stronger from just sort of the geographic nature of the zones and where the school is located versus how the zones extend, but it has other challenges as well. This one impacts the largest number of students. You still have a good balance of utilization among your schools. Belleville's running around 92% in this map, so a little bit more relief than options 1 and 2. But you do have a much greater impact in this map.
Mr. Cropper, would you go back to the elementary?
Yes, sir.
I want to ask Ms. Gwen again, estimated time from Mallory Creek to Town Creek bus ride?
On the 4-minute per mile thing, you're looking at 44 minutes, but based on experience, I don't think it would be that time. Right now, we're running 3 buses into Mallory Creek. One of them makes 5 stops and it's full. So it's just not going to take us that long to get through there. There's such a heavy population right there. I just don't think the 4 minutes per mile is a fair comparison on that, but to keep it standard with the other.
And this group on the bottom would be, how long do you think? You told us that before, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't think it's
50 minutes.
much difference to get them to Town Creek or to Bolivia. I think they'll be about the same amount of time.
Thank you.
One of the things to note about the adjustment, Waterford and Magnolia Green, I know it was discussed a lot, and transportation had talked about this, coming into this area, they could, since the elementary and middle school are on the same campus and the times are staggered for the schools, that they can pick up and fill up a bus for K-8 and fully efficiently utilize a bus and transport those kids back down to the Town Creek campus, elementary and middle school campus. And so I think that certainly is something that the district has evaluated, and I don't want to speak for transportation, but I know that they've talked about that as being a measure they could take to help make that transportation delivery efficient. Option 4 is the last map, and this is one that has just a little bit different of a look, and it puts the northwestern corner of Belleville, the area off of Old Fayetteville Road, as well as Waterford and Magnolia Green would feed into Lincoln in this map. And then in order to balance utilization, we moved an area from Lincoln into Belleville. And so this is that area to the far north. You can see it's tan, north of the black outline, that feeds into Belleville. Now this is one that does balance utilization, but you do have some challenges with transportation, in my opinion, particularly those communities that are across the street from Lincoln. There would be a longer commute for them, obviously, to go to Belleville versus Lincoln Elementary. We've also moved an additional area there off of just west of Belleville Elementary near Chapel Loop Road. That's being moved into Town Creek Elementary here to balance utilization among the schools. And then that southern area south of Belleville that's in green is moved into Bolivia in this map.
What's the bus time on Magnolia and to Lincoln there?
I do not have the mileage on that, I'm sorry, I don't know.
It would be closer than going to Town Creek, though,
It would
by
be.
far. Okay.
It would be closer in miles. I don't know with the traffic situation. I don't know. I haven't looked
Yeah,
at it closely
to take a
enough.
bus from that area to Lincoln, how would you have to go? Back to the back of, to Landale or out the front?
We only have certain places that we can go to in Magnolia Greens because of the POA, which is mostly close to the front of it, right at that traffic circle. That I think we would go in from 17 through the traffic circle and skirt around the edge to the back side and go up Landale then, I think. Is what I think would make the most sense, just thinking about that one.
The middle school zones, again, like the others, follow the elementary lines, and you can see that's depicted on the map here to show you where the Town Creek Middle's lines would fall versus Leland Middle, and also some South Brunswick is impacted as well.
That's correct.
So good balance of utilization in this particular map. You do have a greater impact to students. The second most, option 3, still impacts more than this option, but you have 322 versus 185 elementary kids in the first and second options. Town Creek's a little on the lighter side. It's 59%, but 59 versus 60, it's kind of here or there in terms of the 1% on that. But gives them room to grow. You still have a small feeder pattern split in this map that can be addressed in phase 2, but there is the area that's sent to South Brunswick Middle School would feed into North Brunswick, only 2%. That population right now is zoned for North Brunswick High School, so I imagine if we look at phase 2, we'd probably clean that up and have that all feed so that to resolve a very small percentage of that school being split from South Brunswick to North Brunswick High School. And so, everything else that was basically informing the public how they can participate. We have had a web page that's open and available for the public to view all the materials that we're sharing publicly. They can go and download and print off any of the materials. We have an interactive map that's live that shows all the options that people can go on. There's been feedback forms that have been out there as well as surveys so that we can get input from the public and see what what is being said. And so we certainly have given the public a good opportunity to provide input and to participate in this process, so that coming into this phase of the work, there are not going to be as many surprises from the public. They're aware and informed on what's being presented to you guys for your consideration. We do have the survey running all the way till January 5th, and we'll download that and give you a little survey report so that you can benefit from the survey's input regarding these 4 most recent options before you guys vote, before you have your public hearing on the 7th, which is scheduled for the public to come talk to you and voice their opinions about the maps in a formal manner on January 7th. And then you as a board are expected to vote on a plan January 14th. That's what's on schedule as it sits now. And that's really all I have in this presentation. After this part, I would open the floor for discussion with the community, and this is when we invited them to go look at maps and talk with them about maps and answer questions. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
What's the recommendation on your overall best pick and your recommendation on for transportation? I'm asking for 2 separate recommendations here, one for overall pick and one for transportation and future expansion for us. If they're different, they may not be, but I would like to know what since you're the expert, the public wanted your input, because when we tried to do this in the first phase, we weren't supposed to be making that decision. So
certainly, well, and I was prepared to give you a recommendation on what we feel is the best. And when we look at this, we always try to answer what's the best plan that adheres to your criteria as a whole, as well as adhering to best practices. I think that all these maps are viable for the district. If you implemented any of these, they would be successful. But the one thing that kind of comes back to me is maps 1 and 2 are ones that really solve the objectives, but impacted fewer students. And so community impacts is always a part of this, and something that you always look at and consider. I mean, I would say that option 1 would be our recommendation, because of option 2, it was 1 or 2 was what we were considering. But with the discussion about that area going to Bolivia and the efficiency there that exists in option 1, we would recommend option 1. And I don't think there is another map that would be better in terms of transportation, unless transportation has any say or input on that. But I feel that I did have some heartburn with 1 because of that Waterford and Mallory, Magnolia Green going to Town Creek. But since transportation has addressed that by being able to maximize buses by putting all K-8 students on there, I think they've resolved that concern that I had. So option 1 would be the recommendation that we would recommend. Okay. Thank you guys. It's been an honor to work with you. And
thorough.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we discuss possibly limiting this to 2 options, which gives Sue the possibility to run the numbers on busing and also limit the amount of stress the public may have before our next meeting? I mean, would we be comfortable, the board, limiting that to 2 options?
I'm not.
You're not?
The public still has opportunity to be online.
Comment on it. I don't know why
Until
they
January.
close those comments and take it all as a big package. Just my opinion.
Any other comments or anything? Not?
Motion to go into closed session is stated on the agenda.
Second, all in favor? Aye, opposed?